Hey guys, so I'm looking at my concept map here. You can kind of see that in the middle, I start with the pathophysiology of ventilation and diffusion because I do like to start in the middle, making it a spider map type deal. I like the center to be the first idea of what I'm thinking of, and then I spread out from there. So I went to the right and I kind of color coded. So everything on the right are mechanisms of altered diffusion and how diffusion's been altered in that way. That's all in red. On the left, I have mechanisms of altered ventilation. That's convenient because I think that red kind of signifies blood and diffusion is more related to blood. Ventilation for me was air, and that's more related to the color blue. I just thought it was an easy color coding thing. From each part there, so mechanisms of altered ventilation, I go up to inhibition of neuronal stimulation. I gave some examples there, what it's caused by, an example. And the mechanisms of altered ventilation, there's another example here of the obstruction and restriction of airflow. So I have causes there, suffocation, bronchoconstriction. That's where things get a little hairy. So I also have similarly mechanisms of altered diffusion, decreased partial pressure, decreased solubility up here, some different causes. But all of those 7 examples I found were either listed under obstruction/restriction of airflow under altered ventilation, or increased thickness of the alveolar capillary junction and mechanisms of altered diffusion. So I kind of had trouble mapping this area. You can see it gets a little tough and filled up in this general region. But I kind of really enjoyed mapping this because I found that the more I mapped the treatments, the easier it was for me to understand similarities and differences between the 7 different examples that were given. So first things first is I noticed that COPD and then the different subtypes of COPD listed in the book, which are all down here as extensions, both are caused or examples of bronchoconstriction and the increased thickness of the alveolar capillary junction. That's why I made that one in purple, because blue and red make purple. I thought that was fun. All my treatments are in green. I also found that to be helpful for me. However, I do have this one thing that I wanted to link in here. Cystic fibrosis, a big part of the treatment is avoiding infections. I thought that was a very key thing here. I wanted to make that very obvious by writing avoid rather than all these different treatments. And so I liked adding in that there's pneumonia and the different treatments with the antibiotics, but also pneumonia and ARDS are both treated with oxygen administration. I have similar things over here, asthma, emphysema, and cystic fibrosis, all treated with the reduced inflammation. Those things really helped me understand more clearly the relationships between all of these different types of examples of altered ventilation and diffusion. So even if this is coming from altered diffusion and this is coming from altered ventilation, it was still very helpful for me to see that we're reducing the inflammation here is a huge part of it. Same thing with COPD, smoking cessation. That is a huge thing, and that was very clear to me when making this map. One thing that I felt I understood very well beforehand was the difference between chronic bronchitis and asthma. Emphysema has always kind of been a gray area for me. So as I stated earlier, it was helpful to see these relationships here. For the chronic bronchitis and the asthma, that's where things got really tricky for me. Making this map helped me kind of understand. One is more related to smoking, obviously. Asthma, most asthmatics don't even start smoking, and a lot of patient education is involved in that. I also saw a lot of helpful notes when I was making this map that had to do with monitoring lung function. That was also helpful for me to see. But again, the most challenging part of organizing this was realizing that I had so much room up here and all of these were interconnected. It looked great before I added in the treatments, just to be clear, but that was the most challenging part for me. Overall, I found this to be very helpful, especially with COPD kind of serving as an umbrella term, even though I understand COPD and asthma are pretty darn different, but helping to understand all of these different things fall under this category, and reducing inflammation is a huge key player in this. That was very helpful for me.